When you have a disability, you basically grow up, whether you're born with a disability or you acquire one, learning that you've got to find alternate ways to do certain things. You're used to facing challenges and having to overcome adversity. And sometimes you work that much harder to do it, but you do it.
Hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host, Keegan, and this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. And today, I'm joined once again by Ken Kunken, a man whose story of resilience continues to inspire me and so many others. In part one, he shared his incredible journey from a devastating football injury to becoming the first quadriplegic to graduate from Cornell and going on to counseling to a career in law. Today, we dive even deeper into legacy, family, advocacy, and what it really means to live with resilience day after day. This is Ken Kunken. So, how are you doing today, Ken?
I'm doing great. It's good to talk with you again, Keegan.
Awesome. It's super awesome to have you back on because the world is just such a crazy place all of a sudden, and it's just like, how do we even make sense of this?
Keegan, I'm living a great life. I'm very happy. So it's great to be spending part of today with you.
Sweet. How was your summer? Because last time we recorded, it was a little bit right in there, and now it's been a few months, actually, if I'm not mistaken. Time just flies by. So how is that time in between the recordings?
Well, it's been a really busy summer. I mean, in addition to being a guest on a number of podcasts, my wife, children, and I all traveled out to Montana for a family wedding. We drove out there and back. We've been real active, of course, taking my boys back to school. All three of them are juniors at three separate colleges in upstate New York. We've had a lot of family events during the last few weeks. So it's been a busy summer, but a very good summer.
Oh, man, that's awesome. A busy summer is definitely better than one that's nothing is really going on. How was the drive to Montana? Did that take a few days, or what all did y'all stop and see?
Well, it actually took us, in terms of our total trip, it took my wife and I 22 days. My boys was an extra 23 days. They left in a separate car shortly before us, and they first traveled to Oklahoma City for a GalaxyCon convention. And then they met us out in Montana, and we followed each other back on the way back. Got to see a lot of wonderful sights. Good bonding time with the boys and our family. It was a great trip.
Oh, man, that is way too cool. Family vacations are always something that we can look back on with hopefully fond memories, right?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, every summer, we also do a trip and a vacation up in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, where one of my aunts has a summer home. And we get a lot of family together up there as well. And it's become a family tradition to spend every summer some period of time up there.
Oh, that's awesome. Family traditions and all that kind of stuff really helps bring people together. And not only that, but generation after generation too, most of the time. But there's one of those things too, right? Is that you kind of had to make this, right? It wasn't a tradition that y'all had in place already, right?
It sure was. Actually, Aunt got the place way back in 1969. The first time I was there, because initially she shared it with another family, but then she bought it for herself and our family. In 1972 was the first time I've been up there, and I've been up there, I believe, virtually every summer but one since then.
Man, and let's see. So, how long of a trip does that usually take? Are y'all going to do the same thing this year too?
Well, we were already up there this summer.
Oh, gotcha.
135 miles from our home, and it's maybe 3.25 hours. And it's just wonderful to visit with a different part of my family. That's actually my mother's side of my family. I get to see up there, and down here where I live in Long Island, I'm very close with my father's side of the family.
Okay, that's awesome. So here's a question real quick. Whenever you got struck with your disability and everything, how did that side of the family take everything? How did they adjust to having to adapt?
Well, it was very difficult for everybody, obviously. This type of injury affects the entire family. But it actually brought us all closer. I got to spend a lot more time with many of my relatives. One, because I needed their help, and two, because they felt it helped them get closer to me and, get to know each other better. In fact, one of my mother's sisters, my Aunt Betty, became
Mhm.
one of my closest relatives and friends. We ended up spending a lot of time together, and it just showed the importance not only of family, but how much fun and benefit we all got from spending time together.
Ooh, I love that because I had a big family growing up kind of thing, and unfortunately we didn't really have it to where an accident or anything brought us closer together. In fact, it kind of got rid of the glue. And so the family just kind of went, bloop. So it kind of sucks, but it's awesome to see that the opposite can totally be true.
Well, Keegan, if I might just comment on that. I
Uh-huh.
don't think we got into it during our last discussion, but
Mm.
my family is actually unfortunately used to facing tragedy. Um,
Ooh.
just over a month after I was born, my mother passed away from polio. I was
Oh,
born in
wow.
1950. It was during the polio epidemic, and both my
Mm.
mother and brother Steve contracted polio. Now, fortunately, my brother Steve, who's 2 years older than I am,
Mhm.
completely recovered and, in fact, ended up becoming a terrific athlete. But my
Mm.
mother's condition unfortunately became worse, and less than a month after I was born, she died.
Ugh.
So my family really came together, bonded so closely. In fact, for a period of time, we actually lived with my grandparents, spent a
Mm.
lot of time with both sets of grandparents. And
Mhm.
between them, aunts, uncles, cousins, we've been very close ever since.
Ooh, I love that story, but I'm really, really sorry to hear about your mother. That is absolutely tragic. I think that is one of the biggest, uh, yeah, I don't know the right word for it. Biggest injustices that someone can have is not knowing their parents. So working in the workplace is a lot like working with your family, right? Or getting to
Right?
know your family.
Well, you spend so much time with them each day. You get to know a lot of people in a very
Mm-hmm.
intensive setting because you're working very closely with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And so that's kind of the thing whenever someone says, "Oh, we're all a family here," sometimes it don't feel like that. And now we have this whole thing with DEI being all just like scattered to the wind for whatever reason. But if I'm not mistaken, you're one of the few people that have helped bring that into like reality, right?
Well, when I was injured in 1970, it was well before you even heard the initials of the words DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And this was well before the Americans with Disabilities Act. So
Mm-hmm.
very few facilities were wheelchair accessible. And as a result, you didn't see many people who used wheelchairs out in public back then, whether it be in schools or in the workplace or just out in public places, whether it be restaurants or theaters or just going shopping in stores. So
Mm-hmm.
fortunately, that's changed a lot. And it's wonderful to see more inclusion, more people being involved in everyday life, whether it be in the workplace or in the community. It makes a huge difference. And Keegan,
Mm-hmm.
if I just may comment, I
Yeah.
worked for many, many years at the district attorney's office.
Uh-huh.
And in the district attorney's office, when we leave the job, we go through what they call an exit interview, where you
Mm-hmm.
speak with somebody in the personnel department, and they ask you what you like best about the job, what parts you thought could be improved. And I'm so happy to say that I was often told that many times people said one of the best parts of their job was meeting, working with, and getting to know me. Now,
Mm.
the reason why I wanted to comment on that is I know what they were referring to is
Mm-hmm.
meeting, getting to know, and spending time with somebody with a significant disability.
Mm.
But unless they had a close relative with a disability, most people rarely spent much time with someone else who had a disability. And
Mm-hmm.
many people found that to be a revelation. They were
Yeah.
surprised that, at least for the most part, I had a pleasant attitude, that I was a hard worker, that working with me did not mean additional work for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they seem to have said that it found that it helped inspire and motivated them to do a better
Mm.
job and just feel good about themselves. And I believe when you hear people today talking about DEI, some of them talk about it in a negative way. And I
Mm-hmm.
think they fully appreciate the impact DEI has not just on any one particular individual, but on everybody who comes in contact with that individual. It makes such an enormous difference. I'm pleased. One of the awards that I've received in the office was an award from the Court Officers Benevolent Association. Now,
Oh.
why are they giving an award to an assistant district attorney? Well, they gave it to me because of the positive impact I had on them as well as other court personnel. So having somebody that may be a little different than you can have a very positive impact on the way you conduct your lives, the way about you learn, not only about yourself, but about others. And I believe it's a very good thing if people give it a chance.
Well, yeah, for sure. And that's kind of the hard part, though, right? Is giving people that space to even give themselves the chance, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's worth taking that chance.
I'd have to say so. I know that I saw on Reddit I think it was actually just yesterday, but as I was scrolling along, procrastinating like usual, I saw someone had created a hiking group for people that have lost their legs. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, it was something that was just like, because I love hiking, and I know whenever I had my broken femur, it was something that I was like, I'll never be able to go do this again. And it just, like, it destroyed me. But seeing that, like, some people have lost their legs and they're still going out hiking is really, really cool. But I don't think that that kind of thing would have happened if it wasn't for people like you blazing the way, you know?
Well, thank you. Well, one of the nice things is that more and more facilities are made accessible so that everybody can enjoy them and participate in them. In terms of my background, when I went back to Cornell University, it was not accessible at all for people in wheelchairs. And one of the things that I had asked the university to do was to put in a ramp by my dorm, which had 10 steps just to get in. And I know the administration was initially hesitant, not because they didn't want to help me, but they were concerned that in order to put in a ramp there, they would have to remove 2 bushes that were right next to the building. And they were worried people might protest if they removed bushes. And what happened was, eventually, they had a fire drill. Now, in a fire drill, of course, everybody had to evacuate the building. And the next day, one of the administrators approached me and asked how I managed during the fire drill. And I told him, I was fine. My aide bounced me down the 10 steps, but I felt bad because I know I slowed up the other students exiting. And within 2 weeks, they put up a ramp. Not one student protested the ramp. In fact, most of them preferred using the ramp than walking up and down the steps. And it was then used, by delivery men and people moving their bicycles up and down. And it benefited so many people. The ramp wasn't just for me or my use. I mean, now I'm able to go into New York City and take a train that's made accessible, or take a bus or a taxi that's been made accessible. Yesterday, my wife and I took a trip to Long Beach, New York, and took a long walk on the boardwalk, which has a ramp that is made totally accessible. And you see so many more people out and enjoying their lives because of changes like this.
That is way too cool. And I first got to say that the whole bush thing is kind of silly because they can just move a bush. They don't have to like kill it or anything.
But people just weren't used to making changes. Back then, at least in the early 70s, late 60s, would seem to be protesting about everything without realizing there can be very simple solutions to many of the things. And I think it also showed that people really wanted to come together to help people. When the university was concerned there may be protests, no. In fact, everyone appreciated the fact that they did something to help me, to make my life easier. And that was one of the things that the students liked about doing it.
Okay. So here's the question. What do you think's changed within the last several decades to make people more, well, maybe not so much prone to change, but more accepting of certain changes? And it feels like we're kind of going back to the whole we don't like change mentality. Does it feel that way to you too?
I think part of it just has to do with exposure. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
times when you're not used to something,
Mm-hmm.
you're concerned, you're worried, you're fearful because it's
Yeah.
strange, it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
some people felt that is about people with disabilities. I mean,
Mm.
it just seems scary that somebody, had some type of limitation that
Mm-hmm.
you weren't fully aware how that might affect you. And,
Mm-hmm.
could their disability affect you in some way? And I
Mm-hmm.
the more people saw others out in public that had
Mm-hmm.
varying abilities and were different than them in different ways, it made them more comfortable, and it
Mm-hmm.
made them not only more used to seeing somebody that way, but expecting it. And
Mm.
it also made them feel better about themselves. I know when I
Okay.
eventually got a job as a rehabilitation counselor, the fact
Uh-huh.
that I was now in a position to help others made me feel so much better, not only at the job I was doing and helping people, but it made me
Mm-hmm.
feel better about myself. I felt I could
Mm.
look myself in the mirror and say, I helped somebody today. And I felt better about that.
Oh, yeah. And that's amazing to be able to help people and do that kind of work. One of the things that I've learned is that as I've gone through life, the more I help people, the more I put into other people, the more positive results kind of come about. And that's kind of things that I've got to put some of myself out there, but it's kind of hard to do whenever it's scary to do that, right?
Absolutely. And Keegan, what's certainly clear to me is we all face challenges in our lives. I mean,
Mhm.
some challenges are bigger than others, but
Oh.
for the person undergoing them, they're all very real and
Mm-hmm.
difficult to overcome. And I
Yeah.
think it's important to know and to see other people that may have faced those same challenges and overcome
Mm.
them. When
Mm-hmm.
I was injured in 1970, I didn't see many other people who had my type of disability out in public. And as a
Yeah.
result, I didn't have any role models back then that I could
Mm.
look to for inspiration or to
Mm-hmm.
say to myself, it can be done. There are things
Yeah.
you still can do because somebody's already doing it. And I
Mm.
think it helps for people to see that now. And people are more
Okay.
and more exposed to seeing people with all different types of abilities do all sorts of activities nobody ever believed was possible.
Yeah, that's for sure. That exposure aspect is really powerful too, because I think that's one of those really telling things is that if someone is afraid of something, they're going to be more, I wouldn't say necessarily ignorant to whatever it is that they're fearful of, but they just may not be well aware of what it is they're afraid of.
People are just fearful of the unknown.
Yeah.
Once it's no
Yeah.
longer the unknown, you lose much of that fear.
Yeah, and it's very strange, right? Do you think that that's why maybe the attitude towards DEI has changed? Is that maybe there's not as much exposure as there used to be, or do you think that some people are just kind of like not looking at it through the right lens?
It's a little of both, but I think
Okay.
it's also, the public relations around it.
Mm.
If people are just talking about the negative aspects, which there are very few, if any, in terms
Mm.
of how I look at it, but look at the
Mm.
positive, how it helps others, how it brings us all together, how including people rather than excluding them is a good thing. And
Mm.
I think when they hear about the positives and see how it helps individuals, I believe they'll feel very differently about it. And I
Oh
might
yeah.
add, with DEI, I'm not advocating hiring people that are not qualified to do the job. I'm not
Mm.
advocating that. But I'm
Yeah.
saying don't eliminate people just because you're not used to so many people who might do it a little different way than you normally would have
Mm.
done it. Keep your mind open, options open,
Mm.
and you'll be amazed how much that can help people.
Yeah, for sure. It kind of it reminds me of whenever I've been trained at jobs and they're showing me how to do something, and I'm like, why are you doing it that way? It's more efficient to do it like this way. And they're like, because that's just how we've always done it here. And it's like, okay, like I guess I gotta go with it. But whenever you start to do it your way, people start to go like question it and be like, ah, that's not right. It's like, but it's more efficient. Like it's just the way I want to do it, but it's against the rules. But it's really not. It's just the way that they've been doing it. That they're not used to difference. And I think that that's kind of highlighting what you were talking about earlier too. Is that everyone has challenges, and to that person, that challenge is extremely real. So maybe some people think that their challenges that they've overcome are still worse than other people's challenges, and they think that they everyone else should just get up on their level or something. How do you feel about
It's
that?
a combination of things. I know one of the things people used to ask themselves when they talked about disability is, if you had to have a disability, would you rather be blind or deaf?
Ooh.
And, the people that were blind would say, no, I'd rather be blind because my hearing is so important to me, right?
Mm.
I can't picture living a life where I couldn't hear or use that sentence. And
Mhm.
people that were hearing impaired would say just the opposite. I
Mhm.
rely on my sight for doing everything.
Uh-huh.
How would I be able to function without that? Well, with
Huh.
me, I was very physically active before my injury. So the
Mhm.
thought that now I couldn't do all the things that I did before, I had to find another way of approaching things, approaching tasks, and finding another
Mhm.
way to enjoy life and my
Yeah.
activities. And it made a big difference. But a lot of times people just don't realize the obstacles that are placed in front of people, that there's just no reason for it. And let me just
Mm.
give you another example. When I went to law school,
Mhm.
obviously it was very challenging, but I completed the 3 years of law school during the standard 3-year time period.
Uh-huh.
I passed a very difficult New York State bar exam the first time that I took it. I was very proud to be hired for my dream job as an Nassau County Assistant District Attorney. I
Mhm.
began by going through a very intensive 4-week training program to teach us all aspects of trial techniques from a prosecutor's perspective.
Mhm.
And I was so proud to go to court my first day, and I couldn't fit through the swinging doorways in the courtroom. They
Oh,
were
man.
too narrow to allow me to get through in my electric wheelchair to get to the prosecutor's table. I
What?
mean, those are things I never even considered at law school would be a problem or a challenge in my new career. But that was
Mhm.
an obstacle that all they had to do was widen the doorway, which was so
Mhm.
easy to do. But
Uh-huh.
people either didn't think of it or didn't think it was necessary because you didn't see somebody in an
Mhm.
electric wheelchair in the courthouse at that time. And what a
Yeah.
difference it made. A
Yeah.
simple, a very simple modification.
Yeah. And it's not something that changes the whole world on its head all of a sudden. Like, there's something that can be said about the little things can be spread out to the bigger things in that regard, because now a lot of buildings have that kind of dimensions for doors. They have to be certain width and they have to be a certain height kind of
Correct.
thing. Um,
And they found, hey, that helps mothers wheeling baby carriages, people
uh-huh.
on bicycles, people making deliveries. I mean, in
Mhm.
addition to somebody who may have difficulty using their legs. I mean, really, who wants to walk up steps when you can walk up a ramp, right?
Yeah.
Why exclude certain people by not
Mhm.
making the easy modification that helps everyone?
Yeah, and it's not a specific person, kind of like what you're saying, that we're trying to help. It's not just one person is requesting this because of this. It's one person saw the need for it, and other people saw, oh, hey, we can utilize that same little adjustment for ourselves too. So it helps out everyone.
Absolutely. And a lot of times people say, gee, I'd never thought about that. That is a good idea. Why not
Yeah.
do that?
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of how some people treat or think about, let's just say fast food workers, right? Because some people sit there and say, oh, they're just flipping a burger. That's an easy job, blah, blah, blah. They don't deserve $15 an hour. They don't deserve a living wage, whatever. But I've found that most of the people that say that are the ones that have never worked that kind of job. So,
Right. Right. And quite frankly, they're the same people that will complain if things are not done exactly right or the way they would like it.
yeah, yeah, that's entirely correct. And I think for myself, I avoided that pitfall, not necessarily because I was like, oh, I'm going to go work in kitchens because that's what I want to go do. But that was one of the things that my father told me, is that as I was growing up, he was going to make sure that I worked 1 year of retail and 1 year of food. So that way I knew what other people had to go through on the other side of things. So I would have respect for them more so. But we can't really sit there and tell people to just like strap on this wheelchair for a week and enjoy it. Maybe that would be a way that some people could learn about it, but that's kind of cruel, right?
Absolutely. And I'm certainly not advocating that. But I know people who have unfortunately, let's say, had an injury and
Mhm.
broke their leg, unfortunately, were now either on crutches or needed help getting around. And they've
Mhm.
remarked how difficult things were that they never thought about. Just
Yeah.
being able to balance yourself and open a door and get through at the same time, or getting up a
Mhm.
step and the door is right there at the exact landing and there's no room to move out of the way and open the door. I mean, so many
Mhm.
little things that people don't think about, but that actually help everybody in the long run when they're
Mhm.
changed.
Yeah. Kind of like the engineers just don't really understand life and what people have to do around those buildings and whatnot, you know?
If they take it into account when they're building the building, the
Mhm.
modifications are very simple and do not cost much at all to do.
Mhm.
And I know my children, they were brought up to recognize these things. They
Mhm.
used to go out to a place with their friends and come back and say, Dad, you could go there. We checked. There's a ramp. Most people never even notice that. But my
Oh.
children were brought up that way. They notice it. And when they see somebody with a disability, they'll go out of their way to help them.
Oh, that's really sweet of them and very nice that nice isn't even the right word because it's just better than nice. It's amazing that they would sit there and do that kind of thing. And that actually leads right into the question that I was going to have is how do you recognize whenever someone's been through similar challenges and stuff? Or how do you help those that might be facing similar challenges that you've faced in the past?
Well, first of all, everybody's different. And even
Mm-hmm.
if they were to have the exact same disability, it may affect them differently. And they
Yeah.
may have
Yeah.
different ways of dealing with it. And probably
Mm-hmm.
the best way is to ask an individual, how are they doing today? Do they need any help, any special assistance? Is there anything
Mm-hmm.
we can do to help you today?
Mm-hmm.
And rather than try and guess and be afraid to approach somebody, ask. I never minded people coming up to me and asking questions. I know there
Mm-hmm.
were times when small children would come up and ask me questions, and the parents would try and usher them away because, they didn't want their child to ask what they might consider an inappropriate question. I never minded that. I thought it was great, when
Uh-huh.
somebody's curious about
Mm-hmm.
something to ask it. I mean, the little kids would come up to me and ask me, do I sleep in my wheelchair? Well, no, I get lifted out of my wheelchair into bed, although there are times during the day I may fall asleep in it.
Uh-huh.
But I don't mind answering those questions.
Yeah.
How do you do certain things? I'll tell them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that helps them then deal with other people or feel better about themselves, that they're
Mm-hmm.
not worried about it or they're not worried about something may happen to them.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the things too is that if someone is curious and they're asking you questions, they're building that exposure themselves willingly. And they may even be able to sit there and do something similar to what your sons did and sit there and be like, I recognize that this person is possibly dealing with this. Maybe I can help by doing what this other person does for themselves.
Exactly. And not be fearful of it at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's kind of another thing that I've always been a little bit hesitant myself with, if this makes sense, because I've met people that have either missing limbs, missing appendages, and stuff like that. And sometimes I don't know what to do. Like, it's really awkward whenever you go to high five someone and they don't have that hand. And like, I just kind of sat there and was like, all right, or shake their hand or something. I try to not make comments on it or anything, but like, if I go to shake their hand, and they don't have a right hand, I'll just reach out my left hand without saying anything. I don't know if that's an appropriate response or not.
No, absolutely. It happens to me all the time. People will come up, and when they first meet me, they want to shake my hand, and I can't move my right hand. So I'm
Mm,
not able to do it, but I'll tell them, it's nice to meet you. And, I'm not able to shake your hand, but it's really nice to meet you. Thank you for introducing yourself. I'll have people say,
mhm.
would you like to go for a walk? And immediately feel uncomfortable that you said the wrong thing to me. That doesn't bother me. I'm very comfortable with that. I say the same thing. I'm going to go out for a walk. I don't think people need to be that concerned about every little thing they do. Just be
Mhm.
natural. Just be
Okay.
natural, act natural.
Okay. So it's kind of one of those things to where it's better to have that person kind of recognize it and just not sidestep it per se, but just to address it or act like nothing is out of the ordinary, as opposed to sitting there and making remarks about it, right?
Absolutely. Now, there are some people with disabilities that may not want to answer questions about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine too.
Yeah.
Everybody's different, whether you have a disability or not. And they
Mm-hmm.
say, I'd rather not say, or I'd rather not discuss it. Right?
Yeah.
But, everybody's different.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important to highlight, and like you've done, is that everybody is different, even if their story may be right along the same track, that diverges somewhere, some way, shape, and form, and that will change their entire perspective on things. So whenever you're dealing with this kind of thing, and we have this society where it's slowly starting to become more adaptable to people with disabilities or things that need special adjustments on architecture and stuff like that. So how did it first come about to where you noticed that other people were starting to really take note, aside from that first ramp experience?
Well, I think every time I used to go out in public, I'd be stared at, and that made me very uncomfortable. But the more people saw people with disabilities out in public, whether they be in a wheelchair or on crutches or have another type of disability, the less you were, an attraction for them that was so unusual that people couldn't take their eyes off and treated you more naturally as they would everybody else. And it would become commonplace. When I would be out in public now, people wouldn't bat an eye that I was doing something unusual. And it made me feel more comfortable. And I think it makes the others around me more comfortable when they can feel relaxed, when they can feel it's not anything special they need to do differently. It won't require any hardship on their part. Be more accepting and more open-minded.
Okay. I think you actually just hit something, and you've said it before too, but I think I just now caught on to it, is that whenever people are interacting with people with disabilities, they're possibly afraid that they're going to have to put more effort into either the relationship, either put more work into whatever the interaction may be, stuff like that. And that could really set some people off the wrong way, right?
Absolutely. And, there were times when people would be concerned that if they hire somebody with a disability, it may mean more work for them. That doesn't necessarily mean that. It may mean more work if you hire somebody who's not qualified for a job.
Yeah.
Not if somebody's qualified and just goes about doing it differently. I mean, when I was in the district attorney's office, one of my assignments was to be a trial attorney in our county court trial bureau. And just about each and every year I was there, the number of trials, pretrial hearings, grand jury presentations I did each year were always among the highest in my bureau. Not only did it not require more work for other assistants, often I was doing more work than others were.
That's awesome. And that's one of the ways that you helped build this legacy behind you, right? Is by blazing the way to show others that they don't have to sit there and pick up your slack, because you're not going to let any slack down for anyone to pick up.
Exactly. In fact, I was later made a supervisor in the office. I was given the responsibility of supervising about 25 other assistant district attorneys because they appreciated the job that I was doing, the hard work that I was doing. And actually, when I left the office 2 years ago, the district attorney actually established an award named after me, the Kenneth J. Kunken Award, to recognize the outstanding assistant district attorney in our office each year who showed the characteristics of the person in the wheelchair, right? Who they believe was helping others, showed respect and loyalty to their colleagues, And I'm so proud that not only have they recognized that, but they encouraged that.
Yeah, they not only encouraged it, but they are helping show the way for other people that come in that it's okay to need a little bit of help. It's okay to say I'm different or I do things different. It's okay to say that I've had challenges and I'm still here and going to show up and just work like I should,
Absolutely. And, I know when I was first hired for my job, there were people who had questions. How are you going to be able to do this or do that? And sometimes I had to say, I will figure it out. I'm not sure before I begin how to do it. But just like everything else in my life, I face these kind of challenges. I will figure it out, get the job done.
So very independent minded, right?
When you have a disability, You basically grow up, whether you're born with a disability or you acquire one, learning that you've got to find alternate ways to do certain things. You're used to facing challenges and having to overcome adversity. And sometimes you work that much harder to do it, but you do it.
Yeah. But I think that their real power comes from their creativity, that ingenious aspect that shows them they can do things, but they might have to tweak it a little bit different. Kind of like someone that shows up to a new job and is like, why do we do it that way? They can sit there and go like, hey, I can do stuff a little different.
You know, when I was hired, I later learned one of the supervisors, before he met me, were questioning why I was hired because, as he put it, he can't even write. Well, I found other ways of getting my job done. And I trained my memory to be especially good so that I didn't have to write down every detail when I went into court, when I did a cross-examination or a direct examination or a summation in front of the jury. I found ways of being able to do it even without being able to write.
Ooh, man, having a memory like a bear trap, right?
Well, I certainly used to have it, at least. As I've gotten older, it's not quite as same as it used to be, but it's still pretty good.
Well, that's awesome. I think that neuroplasticity and everything, our brain power, is one of the best things that we can have and cultivate. So it's awesome that you're able to do that. But unfortunately, with aging, everything just kind of goes bleh. I do have a question on that end real quick, though, because we had talked about making connections and everything real quick. And you had to make a lot of them in work and in your personal life. So my question is, so how did you make them more like real, not to where it's more transactional? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but one of the things you have to do is be comfortable with yourself. If you're comfortable with yourself and you're not trying to impress anybody, it puts other people more at ease. So, when I'm dealing with somebody, I recognize I've got certain limitations. I may need certain help, but by the same token, I can find other ways of performing the task, and I can still treat people with respect. I can still give them the time that they need or deserve and try and empathize with what they're going through, what issues they're facing, and not come back and say, geez, your problems are nothing compared to mine, so what are you complaining about? That's not the attitude I want to show people. Their problems are just as real to them as mine are to me, and you need to recognize that and help them be able to resolve them.
So how do you help people recognize that pain is pain, that their challenge is a valid challenge, even if they're trying to downplay it themselves?
Well, part of it is actually saying it and verbalizing those words. I know this has to be difficult for you. I know what it's like to feel anxious, to be afraid, to be fearful, to be worried about something. I also know how physically difficult or painful something can be. I recognize it. Is there anything I can do to help you? Anything I can do to help make it easier for you? Or to recommend somebody that can? Show them that they're being noticed, that they're being heard and not being ignored.
Ooh, that's a really important one, not being ignored. Was that something that you really felt like you had to deal with? I mean, you said that you had a lot of people staring at you in public, but did that come with the same token of like, hey, I need someone to open this door for me real quick, and people just were like, nah.
It's happened. And I know everybody's busy and oftentimes in a hurry. And I know there are times I need to be patient, but I try and recognize that. And I try and help others when I can. I know we're all dealing with issues in our daily lives, but I know most people are really, really good people. They want to help. They want to do the right thing. They're not always sure how to do it and what the right thing is, but they're basically good people who want to help and be helpful.
Yeah. And whenever we're trying to be helpful, sometimes do you think that some people make a fool of themselves trying to help?
I never thought somebody's making a fool of themselves trying to help. Sometimes some are a little clumsier than others. They may try and offer help that actually makes things more difficult, but I appreciate them at least trying and recognizing that somebody may need assistance and trying to offer it. If I find it's helpful, I will thank them and appreciate it. And if I find it's either not helpful or needed, I'll let them know I appreciate the offer. Thank you in any event, but I'm able to manage this.
Okay, that's really sweet that you have people that are willing to do that kind of thing for you. But that kind of goes with the whole territory, I guess. And that does make me ask one question, like with you and Anna, how did that go about with raising triplets? Because y'all had everything else to take care of, right?
Boy, it was certainly a challenge. Now, raising triplets would be a challenge for anybody, any couple, any mother or father. But,
Yeah.
with us, it was particularly challenging. And there were times initially where we had a nanny helping out, but other times when we were totally alone. And just to give you an example, when our boys were little, when it came time to eat, my wife, Anna, would have our 3 boys all in the high chairs sitting around the table, me around the table, and Anna would give a bite of food to Joey, then she'd give a bite of food to Jimmy, then a bite to Timmy, then a bite to Daddy, and then Mommy would take a bite, and we'd go around in a circle. And that's how we'd eat. But it worked. It worked. And that would be a time where we could talk with each other. The boys would be comfortable with helping Daddy. There were times when the boys were little, they would feed Daddy, make them feel good about that. They'd be real helpful to me. And it helped in bringing them up, to have the proper values and the proper traits to show they're going to be very good individuals when they get older.
Well, yeah, that is for sure. And I was just about to say that knowing little kids, they love helping. And so that was going to be one of the questions is that did they try to help feed you?
Oh, they did all the time. Excuse me, when they were little, they would feed me whenever I needed it. And give me a bite, turn on the television or a light in the room. And one of the things they had to be aware of, excuse me, is to clean up after themselves, move their toys so that Daddy wouldn't accidentally wheel over them in his wheelchair. And by the same token, I had to be very cognizant where my boys were every step of the way. Sometimes I would back up in my wheelchair, not realize a little baby was behind me.
Oh, no.
So I heard a scream, and, that was kind of a dead giveaway. I'd best be careful.
Yeah. I do have to say, though, I think you're lucky because you never had to experience stepping on a Lego, right?
Well, that's true. But I did hear it crunch under my wheels a number of times.
Oh, man. Jeez. Well, I gotta say, stepping on a Lego is definitely one of those really painful experiences that I know a lot of other parents have to deal with, but that just... not a lot of other parents have to really worry about backing over their kids either. So, I mean, it's a pro and con situation, right? Kind of like you said.
Right. One of the challenges when our boys were born is getting 3 chairs, seats, car seats for the boys in the van, and having, we have a minivan, enough room for me to get in and out in my wheelchair with 3 car seats because we had to remove the middle chair in the van. And that was quite a challenge, being able to do that.
Did y'all have to go to a mechanic to kind of do all that stuff, or did Anna learn how to be?
It was a lot of investigation on Anna's part and our part, and sometimes it needed a special mechanic, and other times it was just a lot of shopping, and a lot of thought went into each thing we were going to do before we went out anywhere.
Yeah, that was one of those things is that y'all have to plan things a lot more than just being able to say, all right, I feel like going to Hawaii this weekend. How about you? Let's go.
Right. I can't just jump on a plane when I want to, but even just getting in the van, I'd ask Anna, do we have all 3 boys behind me? Let's count, Did we leave anyone behind? So it was always a challenge. But, it was interesting. My boys learned how to help me. And there were times when I'd go out alone with them, just, go into a store or something. And they would make sure they'd look out for Daddy at the same time that I would look out for them. And it was a very good symbiotic relationship that we had.
Oh, man, that is beautiful because a lot of the times whenever you hear stories about the kids growing up and stuff, they have the terrible twos and then you get into the teenage years and everyone's rebellious and stuff like that. Did y'all have that same kind of family dynamic whenever they were growing up?
Actually, it was very different. One, they always had their best friends in the same house as them. So there was never a problem trying to find, a play date for them. In fact, especially during COVID, when everybody seemed to be confined to their homes, somebody who just had one child, that poor child became bored quite a bit. our boys
Yeah.
always had a playmate with them.
Yeah.
So it worked out. But in addition, our boys grew up knowing they needed to be helpful and patient and understanding so that mommy could help not just them, but daddy. So there was basically no sibling rivalry among our three boys. They're each other's
Whoa.
best friends. They root for each other whenever, one of their brothers is doing something. And they try and help each other in any way that they can.
Huh. That's really awesome. How do you think it's because of your disability that kind of helped spur that, or do you think it's more or less the way that y'all raised them? Like, do you think that you could have achieved the same result without being in the wheelchair?
I think it all played a part. I mean, one, I have a phenomenal wife who is just incredible beyond words. And
Yeah.
that made a huge difference. But I also have an incredible extended family that helped give them the proper values and support that they needed. But in addition, one of the activities we had our boys involved in early in their lives was Taekwondo, the martial art.
Ooh.
And that really did benefits for them. I mean, it helped show them respect and courtesy and, the importance of helping others and the importance of developing self-confidence in themselves so that they could then be able to help others. And all three of my boys are now second-degree black belts in the martial art Taekwondo, and they've served as instructors where they've helped teach younger children, not only Taekwondo, but just how to show proper respect and patience and, to know about helping others and not being prejudiced at all.
Yeah. I think that last bit, being prejudiced, is the thing that's really hard to kind of not stamp out, but not have infect maybe the young mind, would you say?
And to be able to recognize differences and not be prejudiced against them, but be accepting. One of the things in our home is that my wife and I are of different religions. My wife is Catholic and I am Jewish. And we celebrate all the religious holidays at our homes, whether it be Christmas or Easter or, Hanukkah, Rosh Hashanah, Passover, and our boys are born up to respect everybody in every religion and feel comfortable about that. I used to work at the Viscardi Center as a rehab counselor. We would bring our boys there every year to the high school graduation where they would watch other children who had disabilities and who have worked hard to go to school and eventually graduate from high school. And we wanted to expose them to that at an early age. And as a result, not just from being around me, but from being around others with special needs or disabilities, have made them better, more concerned, more patient individuals, and more helpful to everyone when they can.
Okay, that's amazing. I'm so glad that you were able to do that for them, and I'm glad that you're also able to kind of pinpoint the little steps along the way, because it could help others sit there and say, ooh, maybe I need to not do this with my kids, or maybe I need to do this with my kids, because that prejudice aspect is a huge thing, because I think we're always comparing ourselves to other people in some way, shape, or form. But if they're able to sit there and say, they have a difference, how can I help? Instead of they have a difference, how do I avoid it? I think that is a big game changer.
Exactly. You said it really well, Keith.
But I do have one question, though. Whenever it comes to your faith and your spirituality, did you pull on that a whole lot whenever your injury first came about? I don't think we've really touched on that.
That's an interesting topic. When I was first injured, I had so many different members of the clergy visiting me in the hospital. Didn't matter whether I was Jewish or whether they were Jewish. There were people from all different religions that would visit me. And they would come in and ask me how I'm doing. And of course, soon after I was hurt, I'd usually reply, terrible. Why did I get hurt? I was a good person. And no matter what religion they were from, they would all give basically the same response. Nobody knows the ways of God, or God works in mysterious ways, but we're sure he has a plan for you. And, initially that did not bring me much comfort. But later in life, sitting here today, I think if God's plan was that I become so disabled and so needy that he would bring my wife Anna into my life, who I originally met because she was one of my caregivers, and that I would fall in love, and together we would become the parents of 3 triplet boys, then I guess it was a pretty good plan.
Yeah.
And I'm very comfortable looking at life that way.
Yeah. I'd have to say so too. It's one of those that everything doesn't have to make sense in the moment, but whenever you look back at it, it does kind of make sense.
It sure does.
Yeah. But I kind of have to ask, like, I thought that there was something about like no inner work relationships and stuff like that.
Well, my wife started as just my weekend personal care aide.
Uh-huh.
So there were a lot of times we were apart, and we found when we were apart, we missed each other. And when we
Oh.
were together, it quickly was not just, an employee to an employer. It was
Uh-huh.
more, we were good friends. And she was
Mm.
trying to help me with my daily needs. And I was helping her perfect her English because she came from Poland.
Uh-huh.
And it turned out we were helping each other. And the more we
Yeah.
got to know each other, the more we appreciated being with each other. And the
Mm.
more it then turned into a romantic relationship and triplets.
Ah. That is way too awesome. I mean, it is amazing because you're a good person and then you have a terrible accident happen and then you go and you help build and create this awesome career and legacy for yourself, and then you find Anna and then y'all have triplets, and then again you're expanding your legacy in that way because your boys are able to sit there with this open mind and heart to sit there and accept people and help them in times of need, instead of sitting there and going like, why do you need this? They just say they need it, so let's help them. They don't question it. They'll just sit there, and it sounds like they'd give someone the shirt off their backs if they had to.
Absolutely. And they are so proactive. We don't need to ask them to help mommy or set the table or clean up the dishes or, shovel the snow from the driveway. They do all that naturally because they were brought up
Mhm.
that way. And they know
Yeah.
not only how important it is, but how helpful they can be to others. And
Mhm.
it's made a huge difference.
Yeah, it is a huge difference. And it's one of those things that's also going to have that ripple effect, as it goes throughout the years, because they're going to infect or they're going to affect people with their happiness and helpfulness. And it's going to spread from that person to another person, so on and so forth. And so I bet you there's like a giant puddle or like a giant pond around the name of Kunken, and it's all about helpfulness and kindness.
It's great. When our boys were in elementary school, we were fortunate that the school they went to was large
Mm.
enough where they could be in 3 separate classes. We thought that would
Ooh.
be a good thing if they were separated and not always doing everything together.
Mhm.
And our boys were so well liked and made such good friends that at the end of each year, when the children were assigned the teacher for the next year, we
Mhm.
met so many parents who came up to us and said the first question they'd ask their child was not what teacher did you get, but what Kunken did you get? Which one of the Kunkens will you be in class with this year? And it just was so great to hear that. The best thing anybody can ever do or say to me is give me a compliment on my children.
Yeah.
That makes me feel better than anything. And I'm so proud to say I've gotten so many compliments on my 3 sons. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, that is wonderful because again, it's one of those things that you didn't think was ever going to happen. And whenever it did finally happen, I mean, Dad would have just been ecstatic right there, just like, oh, hell yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, talk about the impossible becoming possible. I
Mm.
never would have envisioned this in my wildest dreams, that I would become the father of triplet sons.
Mm-hmm. And they're going on to help make the world a better place, much like you did in your prime, right?
Thank you. I believe they will. I believe they
Yeah.
certainly will. They're certainly on
Yeah.
their way.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be big things. It doesn't have to be big legal battles. It doesn't have to be in the courtroom that change is made. It's made in the everyday little things, and that's where things really add up, and that's where they're pros at, I think.
They make a
So,
difference in everybody's lives that come in contact with them. And they do that on a daily basis, just like you just said.
yeah, and they do it with love and care and not because they're trying to gain accolades or internet clout. So
They know they don't have to impress anyone.
yeah.
Just meeting them, people get impressed.
Oh, that's awesome. Maybe we can have a 4-way call one day where it's all 3 of us. It'd be 4 of y'all, 1 of me, so it's all 5 of us together.
That would be great. Well, as I indicated, right now they're at 3 separate colleges, pursuing 3 different majors, and have super busy schedules. But perhaps on a vacation one time, that would be great. You know, it's interesting because, you know, in the past I've gotten a lot of publicity, and sometimes my children would be around when they were younger, certainly, and, you know, the interviewers would want to ask them questions. And my boys were so good in responding with such appropriate answers and statements that it was such a pleasure to see.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. We are like right at the end of this episode, but do you have any words to leave the audience with this afternoon, this morning, whatever time of day it is that they're listening?
You know, Keegan, every morning that I get up, I know that I could either have a good day or a bad day. That's up to me. I choose to try and have a good day each day. You know, I choose to try and wake up smiling and think maybe today I can help somebody else with their needs and make it a better day for them. And I think we all have that type of choice when we get up in the morning, that type of decision to make, and as best as each person can, to make it a good day.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's something that we can all take with us a little bit and just say, do I want to be a good person today? Yeah, I want to be a good person today. So, Ken, I gotta say thank you for being on Retrieving Sanity again. It has been an absolute honor and a pleasure, and I can't wait to meet your boys and see what all they've got to say about their great dad. So
that sounds good to me as well, Keegan. Thank you.
All right, sounds great. And Anna, I know you're back there in the background, so thank you for everything that you do for Ken and your boys. And hello. Thank you for everything you've done. And everyone out there, thank you for listening to Retrieving Sanity on WDJY 99.1 FM. And as always, love yourself, love others if you can, but you got to love yourself first to do it right. Don't forget to call 988 if you've got some bad thoughts in your head, but also be sure to check out Ken Kunken. Oh, Ken, where can they find you in your book again? I forgot to ask that earlier on.
Well, if they go to my website, which is kenkunken.com, and Kunken is spelled Kunken, go to kenkunken.com.
Ken, thank you for that. And everyone out there, stop by kenkunken.com, check out his book, check out the audiobook. But see y'all next week. Much love.
Bye.